Welcome back to another edition of Hometown Heroes on Family Life. I'm Mark Webster, and this week's guest is Mike Hennessey with Youth for Christ in Rochester, New York, which is responding to an epidemic of fatherlessness there with a basketball-based program called the Fatherhood Initiative for boys without dads.
Every chronic culture problem we face leads back to a root of fatherlessness. Homelessness, poverty, drug addiction, incarceration, domestic violence, abortions, you name it. Any really chronic culture problem we face, you go back far enough and you find 75 to 90% of the time it's a fatherless home.
Tell me about the Fatherhood Initiative and how it's trying to change that.
In Rochester, we actually have a 73% fatherlessness issue. It's one of the highest concentrations in the country. It's pervasive across the country, but not at these high concentrations. Nationwide, 1 in 4 homes is fatherless. In Rochester, it's 3 of 4, 73% fatherless homes. So we wanted to have an impact on that because we believe that there's absolutely no substitute for a godly father figure in a young child's life, especially young men. We focus on young men. It's just as important for girls, but we focus on the young men first because it's really critical, we think, for a young man to have a godly father figure in his life. So we started the Fatherhood Initiative. It became 4 annual conferences where we brought in men in ministry who were doing the work of mentoring that came from the urban community, men of color, Mike Peace from Bethel Express, Cuevas Walker from Go Ministries, Reggie Cox from the Fatherhood Connection. These are men that lived in the city, lived in the culture, came from fatherless homes, several of them, and could speak to it from experience. And we had 4 conferences with mostly of these men and other men like them. Moses Robinson, who was the community liaison officer for Rochester Police Department. And we just brought all these men together to shine a light on the fatherlessness issue because it's a stigma in the community. People don't like to talk about fatherlessness. And after 4 years, those conferences produced men for us to bring into our gymnasium as part of our basketball program that's run by Coach Felix Ortiz. We started the Fatherhood Initiative. It produced these men that wanted to give back to their community and sow into a young man's life. Coach Felix took those men and trained them and brought them into his basketball program. And now we have 4 to half a dozen men every Friday night in our gym that gives us the opportunity to create a safe sanctuary for these boys playing basketball and also a Christ-like culture. It's hard to have a Christ-like culture and safe sanctuary when it's one coach on 30 kids. But when you have a half a dozen men in here all working together to bring encouragement and recognition to these young men and to become a part of their lives, it changes everything. And so it's had a huge impact on our basketball program. It's not just a basketball program now, it's a mentoring program where you play basketball.
Well, basketball is a team sport, and so I guess in this case is modeling, what a father's supposed to be like.
Yeah, we use basketball as bait to get them in here and get them the gospel, and it's been working for many years here. It's amazing, Mark. We've had several different moms call Coach Felix and just to tell them that, my son was going the wrong way. He was making bad decisions. We were seeing all kinds of red flags. But since they began going to your program and you began mentoring our son, he's completely turned it around. Back on the honor roll and back in doing the right things and getting away from the wrong friends. We really haven't had anybody that has been in our program for longer than a year that hasn't graduated high school. Coach, he's really big on the idea that it's more than basketball here at Youth for Christ. He teaches them all the time the decisions you make off the court are 100 times more important than the decisions you make on the court, because on the court it can cost you a game, off the court it can cost you your life. And these young men are embracing it. We've created a strict code of conduct for being a part of our program. We tell them we play church ball here, not street ball. There's not going to be any foul language. You're not going to argue with the ref. There's no phone use during the time you're here. Tough as that in on kids at the beginning, they adopt it, they love it, and keep coming back for that safe sanctuary. When you've got violence going on in Rochester like we had 1 year where 60 kids under 18 were shot in 1 year. And the following year, we had 60 kids under 18 who stole a car. These kids don't feel safe in their neighborhoods or the rec centers. There was 5 shootings at 3 of the city rec centers in 1 year. Turns out that gang members play basketball too, and sometimes they go go there to settle scores. And we created the Safe Sanctuary alongside men who encourage the young men and give them recognition. If dad didn't stay, that kid's literally dying on the street from lack of recognition he didn't get from a dad who didn't stay. So we say to guys coming in, don't overthink it. Give a young man encouragement. Give him the recognition he's craving for. Be authentic and be consistent, and you'll win that kid over every time. If you're consistent, you can even get the first three wrong and win that kid over, because that's really the main thing that kid is craving, is a godly role model in his life.
That's Mike Hennessey with Youth for Christ in Rochester, New York, responding to an epidemic of fatherlessness there with a basketball-based program for boys called the Fatherhood Initiative. They also run a God's Girls program for fatherless girls. Please join us again next week as we search for your home, your town, your hero. It's Hometown Heroes on Family Life.